The American legal system is full of archaic and strangely funny laws about food that were invented centuries ago. So when we come across some goofy rule that seemed to defy common sense, it's easy to believe that it's true. As it turns out, most of these laws are exaggerations, and a few are outright lies. But believe it or not, some of them are actually real and are still enforced. So today, we're going to take a look at the truth behind the strangest food laws in the US. Before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History Food channel. After that, please leave a comment and let us know what other legal matters you would like to hear about. Okay, time for a heaping helping of the law with a side of justice. Imagine you're on a road trip with a couple of friends and you're passing through Oklahoma. You stop to grab a burger and offer your friend a bite. But before they finish chewing, police cars have you surrounded like you just fled a book depository in Dallas. And before you can figure out what's going on, you're placed under arrest and dragged off to stand trial for sharing your food. Apparently, the residents of Oklahoma are extremely protective of their burgers. And it's widely believed that it's illegal to take a bite out of someone else's hamburger throughout the state of Oklahoma. Legend has it, the law was passed by greedy politicians protecting their donors in the restaurant industry from having to waste seats on people who were just there to mooch off their friend's plate. But despite being widely cited as an example of wasteful legislation, there's no evidence this law ever existed. In fact, a 2018 investigation by Oklahoma news station KGOU found no trace of the law in the state's database of regulations. Nor could they find anyone at the state capitol, health department, or Oklahoma City Police that was aware of the source of the alleged Hamburger Law. Similarly, a search through decades of Oklahoma newspapers found no mention of the legislation. So don't worry, Oklahomans, you can share those burgers without keeping a lawyer on speed dial. Unless you're eating one while walking backwards through downtown Oklahoma City. That's allegedly also against the law, and that one might actually be true. Fishing laws around the country typically prohibit the use of explosives, firearms, and other implements of military-style destruction as fishing gear, because laws occasionally get in the way of someone having an awesome time. That might explain why Tennessee made it illegal to catch fish with a lasso. Like Oklahoma's Hamburger Law, it's a widely believed fact that the volunteer state would rather throw you in jail than let you try and rope a fish. Wait, how is that supposed to work? Who cares? Let them try. As you may have already guessed, while lassoing fish may be technically illegal, this law isn't exactly real. The Tennessee Code annotated section 70-4-104 specifies that a person can only use a rod, reel, and hook to fish. While the implication is that any other method of catching fish is forbidden, the law does not specifically ban using a lasso. It's similar to another widely cited but fictitious law that prohibits fishing while riding a camel in Idaho. In other words, our hopes for a fish rodeo are still very much alive. In Connecticut, pickles are so prized for their bouncing properties that there's allegedly a law in the books which states that unless a pickled cucumber bounces, it can't legally be called a pickle. And if you sell an unfit pickle, they banish you to New Jersey. Okay, we made that last part up. The seller would just be fined, but that still feels a little harsh for selling a pickle that doesn't bounce. So is this a real law or just another unfit pickle? The answer is a firm not really. According to a 1948 article in the Hartford Courant, what happened was this. Two men were deemed to have sold pickles that were unfit for human consumption and were slapped with a $500 fine, or roughly $6,500 today. That's pretty stiff for a pickle. During a subsequent press conference, Frederick Holcomb, the Connecticut Food and Drug Commissioner, apparently told reporters that when it comes to pickles, a consumer should be able to drop it on one foot and it should bounce. But the commissioner was likely just generalizing about what makes a good pickle. His words have never been officially encoded in Connecticut law. Fans of The Simpsons might remember the classic episode, Lard of the Dance, in which Homer quits his job to sell grease he steals from local restaurants. It seems far-fetched, but it's closer to real life than you may have expected. The truth is, restaurant grease really is a hot commodity, as well as an environmental hazard. So theft and proper handling and disposal are legitimate concerns. That's why stealing $1,000 or more of grease is a felony in North Carolina, and that law is completely real. Previously, cops hadn't been treating grease theft as a real concern. So in 2012, more stringent legislation was passed to encourage law enforcement to take grease bandits like Homer more seriously. Stress eating is a common response to grief. So imagine going to a wake for a dearly departed loved one and being told that the police will be notified if you eat more than 3 sandwiches. And it doesn't matter what size they are. Whether the catering went for finger sandwiches or 10-foot heroes, the state of Massachusetts does not want you putting away more than 3 of those bad boys while paying your final respects. It sounds like a rule the Mad Hatter would invent, and that's because it's not entirely accurate. The truth is that up until around 2011, Massachusetts did have a law preventing the serving and consuming of any type of food during a wake. The reasoning behind it was to prevent food from being served in close proximity to dead bodies and embalming chemicals in the interest of public health. Given that all food was banned at wakes, there was obviously no need to outlaw a specific number of sandwiches, although eating 3 would presumably make you the Bonnie and Clyde of New England. You know America has lost its way when a person can't walk around with ice cream cones in their pockets anymore, like they did in the good old days. We assume. But apparently, back in those same old days, horse thieves used to stuff their pockets with ice cream to lure horses away from their stables, like an ice cream truck driver with too many DUI convictions. Consequently, many states have laws forbidding you from carrying ice cream in your pocket, including Kentucky, Alabama, Georgia, and New York City. If that sounds too ridiculous to be true, that's because it isn't. Although it sounds like a clever Ocean's 11-style cheat code for stealing a horse, stuffing your dockers full of loose rocky road isn't an irresistible horse lure and will just leave you walking home cold and sticky. There's never been such a law in Kentucky or any other state. Sending someone a pizza they didn't order is a classic prank, but we wouldn't try it in Louisiana. Why? Because if you send a pizza to someone's house without their knowledge, you could be fined $500. That's a steep price to pay for some yucks. But is it true? Once again, the answer is yes, sort of. Louisiana doesn't have a law specifically banning pizza pranks. This off-cited factoid is a loose interpretation of a real law. In this case, Revised Statutes Title 14, Criminal Law Section 1468.6 on the unauthorized ordering of goods or services, including pizzas. In other words, the law covers pizza deliveries, but it isn't specifically about them. It's about sending anything to a person's house without their knowledge or permission. Another fact that you're likely to come across on lists of weird food laws is that there's a law in Alabama that prohibits an individual from putting salt on railroad tracks. Given you'd have to be pretty hungry to eat railroad tracks with or without salt, it's hard to imagine that this was ever really a problem. But apparently, it was so serious that violation of the rule is punishable by death. Theories hold the rule may have been made out of concern for the construction and condition of the tracks themselves, or because salt attracts cattle, which could lead to a collision with a train, or an unexpected friendship. But while at least one Alabama law firm cites this law as a factoid on their website, they don't say how, when, or why it was passed, or where it can actually be found in the Alabama statutes and regulations. So while we can't definitively say whether this one is real, it's probably safe to add some seasoning to your nearest railroad crossing. In 1939, when Hitler was busy taking over Europe, the people of Maine bravely took on the folks who enjoyed tomatoes in their clam chowder, or at least they tried to. According to popular legend, in 1939, Maine attempted to pass a regulation banning tomatoes from clam chowder until the end of time. We understand the sentiment. Believe it or not, this story is actually true. A state legislator named Cleveland Sleeper, who claimed tomatoes polluted clam chowder, did in fact draft a bill forever banning them from the New England staple. However, what often gets left out of the tale is that Sleeper was making a joke. For example, his proposed punishment for violating the law was to make offenders dig up a barrel's worth of clams at high tide, which is essentially impossible. Sleeper also never actually introduced the bill to the legislature. He just wrote it up as a goof. Not that we shouldn't consider passing it. Hawaii is one of the most popular tourist destinations of all time, thanks in some small part to Magnum PI. But in the interest of keeping people from drinking excessively, Hawaii passed a law that prohibits individuals from having more than one drink at a time if the drinks are over a certain size. You can't two-fist it in paradise. Standard sizes for drinks are 16 ounces for spirits, 22 ounces for a beer, and 6 ounces for wine. And every server in Hawaii is trained to abide by the law, which is why they might occasionally ask you who the drinks you're ordering are for. At least, that used to be the case. According to the Maui News, the Hawaiian legislature passed a package of changes to the drinking laws in 2019 that, among other things, replaced the limits based on the number of drinks with limits based on total volume of alcohol served. Sounds like hurricane season has started again, and we don't mean the meteorological event. Who among us has not occasionally felt the urge to go out and get hammered with a moose? Bullwinkle looks like a fun hang, but the truth is, moose are already dangerous, so getting them drunk is like reliving your worst friend's 21st birthday. And according to Alaskan legend, apparently once upon a time there was a local tavern keeper who kept a pet moose and would let his patrons serve it drinks for their own amusement, like a jukebox. Inevitably, the drunken moose went on a rampage. Must have given it light beer. In response, the mayor had the city council pass a law putting an end to the moose booze. While the story may or may not be true, nobody seems to be able to find whether this law was ever on the books in Alaska. Either way, keeping your moose sober is probably good advice. You've likely heard the old saying that you should wait at least an hour after eating before going for a swim, lest the sharks get lured in by the lingering scent of beanie weenies. But Maryland allegedly went a little overboard and made it illegal to eat while swimming in the ocean. The sharks are presumably exempt. So is it true? Possibly. Maryland does have a criminal law against adding disease germs, bacteria, poison, or poisonous matter to water if the water supply is used or is usable for drinking or domestic purposes. It also has rules preventing the dumping of things like trash, garbage, oil, and other liquid pollutants. And every one of those words has been used to describe a basket of cheese fries at some point. So it's entirely possible one of these laws might have been used to arrest someone for bringing food into the water. But there doesn't seem to be a record of it, and there's no specific statute that bans eating in the ocean. One of the most frequently cited strange food laws is that it's illegal to substitute oleo or margarine for butter in the state of Wisconsin. All state institutions, including prisons, schools, and hospitals, are required to serve the real deal unless there's a legitimate health issue. In fact, it's actually illegal to have oleo or margarine out on the table of a public restaurant unless it's been ordered by the customer. That can't possibly be true, right? Well, you'd better start believing it's not butter, because this law is 100% real. Because Wisconsin's economy relies so heavily on dairy, the legislature passed these laws to protect local businesses. In fact, the state passed a ban on yellow margarine as early as 1894. But when the law was eventually repealed in 1967, these other anti-margarine laws remain on the books. Or would that be cookbooks?
And you're gonna stick it in the stick of butter.
So what do you think? And did you believe in any of these alleged food laws? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from Weird History.